Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Midway, starring not the original Charlton Heston movie, but the Roland Emmerich film, starring Ed Skrein, Patrick Wilson, Luke Evans, Mandy Moore, Luke Clantank, Kean Johnson, Nick Jonas, Dennis Quaid, Aaron Eckhart, and Woody Harrelson. Well, I'll say it one more time. Directed by Roland Emmerich. Now, I would have done the original Charlton Heston Midway movie, but I didn't have time, and I didn't know that was actually in existence until I got closer to this movie after Pearl Harbor last week. And is this going to be comparable to Pearl Harbor? Let's get into the movie and find out. We start off in 1937, which is before the Japanese, which is a few years before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. We get Isoroku Yamamoto, who was in the previous movie I reviewed last time, who quietly informs intelligence officer Edwin T. Layton, played by Patrick Wilson, that they will attack if their oil supplies are threatened, while Edwin says nobody wants a war, and we move on to 4 years later, on, the morning of December 7th in the year 1941, as the USS Enterprise, which made me think of Star Trek, where we meet Dick Best, played by Ed Skrein, as he's out of gasoline on his plane and causes a dangerous stunt. And this opening 10 minutes goes pretty much nowhere for me. And I don't like any of the characters, despite they're not as worse as last time, where another hack of a director, Michael Frickin' Bay, goes prolonged on the action in that movie compared to another hack of a director of this movie, Roland Emmerich, is making this more about the pilots than last time. And I don't hate them as much, whereas with Pearl Harbor, as Bay made it more about the romance. The Japanese attack Pearl Harbor and goes much quicker by, like, I don't know, 20 minutes than in the Michael Frickin' Bay movie. While he took too long to get to the damn point, like, we get it. That's what happened, as it was prolonged in that movie compared to this movie, where we see the pilot's point of view of the story, unlike in Pearl Harbor, as Edwin goes in the office while the American soldiers are being attacked and killed by the Japanese, as we meet William Bull Halsey, played by Dennis Quaid, wants to send Wade McCluskey, played by Luke Evans, and his crew to fly and shoot the Japanese down. And they fly over to Pearl Harbor, as this doesn't go prolonged, whereas Michael Bay made the attack about 30 minutes long, as this movie gets to the point and takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and that's a better take than what Pearl Harbor did. Dick sees his wife Anne, played by Mandy Moore, and his daughter Barbara, and I believe this is my first Mandy Moore acted film that I've reviewed for the show, and I'll get to Tangled at some point. And I first knew and fell in love with her in a movie called A Walk to Remember back in, I believe, 2002, as I don't get to really know her character in this movie, and I love her in general, but this movie sadly doesn't do her any favors. While Dick visits some people in the hospital, and Yamamoto is congratulated for starting the war with the Americans back in World War II, and Chester W. Nimitz, played by Woody Harrelson, gets the new commander job. And do I give a crap? Not by a long shot. And this is the shorter movie than Pearl Harbor, as this is 2 hours and 19 minutes compared to Pearl Harbor with a 3 hour runtime. Doesn't get to the damn point, and like that movie didn't either. After the funeral of Roy Pierce, played briefly by Alexander Ludwig, and the American soldiers drink to celebrate his life, as Dick wants to go after the Japanese and yells at Chester about how they want to attack you, as Edwin asks Chester to be moved to another position because he feels disgraced, and we move on to February in the year 1942, and his team of soldiers fly to Japan to fight them and blow their ships up like they did in Hawaii, but doesn't hit it, as they have a second location of enemy fighters, and the action sequences are a bit better than what Pearl Harbor did, as I'm going to give the director Roland Emmerich credit for getting to the point as of the war compared to what Michael Frickin' Bay did. And how can I not compare these scenes being better than anything in Pearl Harbor did? And how is this is a better movie than Pearl Harbor, in my opinion, as that was tough for me after watching it last time. And I should have watched the original Midway and Tora 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 for that matter, but maybe one day I'll get there. When the Japanese try to blow up the USS Enterprise, Bruno Gato, played by Nick Jonas, shoots them down. And Nick Jonas is in the Jonas Brothers. Why is he here? I don't know. And gets promoted by Bull, joins the fighting with the soldiers, as we move on to a dinner scene with Wade and Anne and Dick, as she talks to Wade about how she's missing as far what she's missing as far as what Dick tells Anne, while Dick and Edwin chat about how Dick is rooting for a smart guy like Edwin to get into higher authority. And Dick and Anne dance to a song that's in the credits. And Dick has a beautiful family as he tries to give a lecture in April of 1942, and someone interrupts as we hear Jimmy Doolittle, played this time by Aaron Eckhart, whereas last time played by Alec Baldwin in Pearl Harbor, coming by with planes while the men want to fight and test the planes. And am I dreaming, or is this editing all over the place? Because my God, I felt it at times as it's going all over the place, as it could have been much worse than what Pearl Harbor did, where it was more obnoxious. In Hiroshima, Japan, we get Yamamoto praying he'll win the war. As we know in the history books, and we'll see it at the end of the movie, he doesn't. And Doolittle arrives in China for a mission and gets welcomed by the Chinese, which is a scene that could be in the editing room floor, as it wasn't very necessary. While Edwin tells Chester something about Japan's next move, and they blow up a bit of China because they know their solution is here, and they're attacking families in China. As we move on to May of 1942, where Bull talks with Wade and Dick about they are depending on them, as he promotes Wade and bumps Dick up to where Wade was. And the choices being made in this were rather funny in a strange way. Edwin tells Chester Washington is making a mistake about keeping the Enterprise on the sea, as they visit Edwin's friend Joseph Rochford, forgive me if I said that wrong, as he says the Japanese will hit Midway and shows them how it works by codes, and they read the codes. And this was reminding me of the Imitation Game, where they get the code on how England beat the Germans at the same time in World War II. Excuse me. That was another film I reviewed a while back. As Chester will take the talk with Washington about if they're right about this while sending a message to Bull, but he burns it up, and they don't believe Edwin, Chester, and Joe, as they plan for Japan's arrival to Midway, and they meet with the filmmaker named John Ford, who is filming a movie called December 7th, which came out in the year 1943. And Dick has a meeting with his group and puts a new guy whose name is James Murray as his wingman. And I'm having not a bad time with him, but not my favorite time at the movies. But at best, I'm having a mediocre time. Bull is visited by Chester, and he tells Bull to take some time off. Because he has a damn rash and of some kind. And while Dick writes a letter to Willie West's mother, as he feels depressed about it. Let's see. And yeah. And tells Anne about it, as Chester takes over command and works with Edwin on his plane and lands to get off the Enterprise, and they get Bruno out as he's wounded, and Wade says to Dick he liked him better when he's a cocky person. While he wants to get some Americans out of Japan, while I couldn't make sense of that scene. And we move on to June 1942, as John Ford continues filming his movie, and this is so far a better time than Pearl Harbor in my opinion. The Japanese attacks Midway, while John Ford films the movie of his, and Chester gives the order to watch out for their next move, and they fight the Japanese planes. And despite I have an hour of movie left, I'm feeling this dragging for a bit too long, while an American plane almost crashes on a Japanese ship like they did earlier in the film, which was a tad bit hilarious, while Bruno takes off by plane, and so does Dick, as one of the guys gets sick while flying in enemy territory. And I'm kind of bored, as I say, kind of, because I don't know what in the hell is going on at this point in the movie, and at this point, I don't know if I care. The American planes try to blow up a Japanese ship, while one plane, whom I'm thinking is Bruno, gets hit into the water, but he's somehow alive, and I don't know for how long how he made it in. The planes go towards as they almost hit the Japanese ships, and the second and third one missile, hits them, and Kroger hits the last one and becomes the hero he wants to be as he blows it up. And this action sequence was intense and better staged than anything Pearl Harbor did. They shoot down one Japanese plane, and the Japanese get scared because of their ships going kaboom, and sail goes to Yamamoto, and Edward gets a message Washington has we move on to a battleship, while Bruno is on a lifeboat and gets captured by a Japanese ship, and they're getting interrogated, as well as thrown overboard with something heavy as Nick Jonas dies, and the other one, I'm guessing, tells them as they prepare for an attack, while Wade and Dick report to the captain. And after the meeting, Wade goes to the hospital and Dick coughs blood as he might need a doctor for that because nobody else knows this, and his co-pilot Murray is scared to go back out there while Dick coughs out blood and decides to go with them. And the dialogue is acted pretty damn badly. They go back out there and to fly and fight the Japanese as a couple of the planes go in the water, and Dick blows up as a battleship and makes it explode while they're hit with the plane landing roughly while Dick is still out there. And Anne and Barbara go to a family friend's house as Anne is worried about Dick being out there, and he arrives on the Enterprise with some damages on his plane, and he almost crash lands, but they roughly landed as they get Dick out because he's coughing blood, and it took a miracle of guts, and that was okay with me. The Japanese gets their battleships down as some of them escape, and Yamamoto is told they lost the war, as Joe learns along with Edwin they won the war as they're retreating, and goes to Chester to tell them the Japanese are retreating. And we get the biopic story of what happened to the characters afterhand, and Dick is in a wheelchair reuniting with his wife and daughter. And the climax is something done better than anything Pearl Harbor did, but why is that? Let's talk about it. And the rating. I'll give this movie a 4.4 out of 10. Definitely better than the overlong Michael frickin' Bay movie, as he took too long to get to the point. Whereas here, it didn't take as long as in that movie, as I credit director Roland Emmerich for getting to the point, unlike Michael frickin' Bay, as this is a long movie at 2 hours and 19 minutes compared to Pearl Harbor, where that thing was 3 hours. And I don't like any of the characters, even Mandy Moore, who's an actress I love since 2002, but this movie doesn't do her any favors, which makes me sad. The action sequences are a bit better than anything Pearl Harbor did, as the editing goes all over the place, but it's not like in Pearl Harbor where it was like 1, 2, 3, next scene in an obnoxious way. But it could have been much worse than in that godforsaken film. And the choices being made in this movie were funny in a strange way, and this feels a bit better than what Pearl Harbor did, in my opinion. It's a mediocre time at the movies, but at the end of the day, I didn't like the movie, as Roland Emmerich isn't as big a hack as Michael frickin' Bay is, in my opinion, as this is a better made movie than Pearl Harbor, as how can I not compare it to anything done in Pearl Harbor, as you couldn't even fix that movie, despite this is a mild non-recommendation for this movie, but it's a better time at the movies than that godforsaken film is, in my opinion. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and until we get going, until my next review, honor the soldiers in 1941 in World War II.